It gets kind of difficult because I think it's like there's a sort of both and situation that you kind of end up in, is that, I mean, in the narrative, that the reality that we are currently participating in, I think that there are individual awarenesses above and beyond human consciousnesses that people have been interacting with for a very, very, very long time. I think that they try to gain the attention and sway of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that some of them there are certain dominants like that have existed for like long periods of time.
Can you give us a specific?
I mean, the one that Gnosticism talks about, and I'm not saying I don't think this is the first or the last entity, but they would say that the God of the Old Testament is Yaldabaoth, which is a false creator. And so there was there were these things called aeons that existed in the heavens. This is just a story that they tell, but
I've heard
so
of it.
take it literally, but it's also a metaphor, but it also kind of functions literally. So it's there's one of these both and sort of situations.
Yeah.
And so what you have is a God that separates itself from the collective, the group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes and it takes from the existing matter of the world and puts it together in a very shoddy way and says, I am the ultimate creator and I made the earth. Even though...
But they're imposters.
Well, the thing is that because the thing that Yaldabaoth in the story makes a reality out of existed before them, he's not a creator. He is a thing pretending to be king in the reality, right?
Kind of building with what he already has.
Building with what already exists. Building out of pieces of the imaginal, or of pieces of the totality of the existing, the God that exists that is the totality. That's the way I like to use
like
God.
Led Zeppelin stealing blues music.
It's like God's everything, right?
I feel like language is hard.
Yeah, and so what I see going on is that there may have been other aspects, but what you have is you have a false creator, right? And so what this thing does is it pretends like it is the ultimate God in reality, and it says, I'm the ultimate God. I do have control over aspects of this domain. If you follow me and I'll reward you, right? But one of the things that you have going on is you have the Abrahamic faiths in particular have been the dominant for several thousand years now, right? And so what you have is through the worship of a deity that has certain characteristics, I think that culturally and religiously you begin to emulate the creator, right? And so what you have is you very quickly have the beginning of heroes. You have individualized egos acting on behalf of themselves. They're saying, I am the creator of my own world. I have drive, I have will that supersedes any other obligations that would exist in, say, like a more tribal, or let's say you live in a pantheistic world, you have to contend with all of the other aspects. And so when you focus on a single thing that says it's the creator and you begin to identify with it culturally, you basically set up, instead of a balance of like a pantheon or of a pantheism, you end up with a dominance hierarchy. You end up with a God that says this thing. And so what you see is culture continually emulates that, and the individual emulates that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you basically have several thousand years of not by the same name, but this archetypal figure, right? So you have, the way I would talk about it is you have I think it starts with Zoroastrianism, is this sort of this or that creator god sort of mythology, right? And then you have the Hebraic faiths, which were very, very diverse. And then from there, there's huge influence with Egyptian lore and the idea that there's a single dominant god. And then the Greeks, you have the same thing. I'm not saying it necessarily started with, Yaldabaoth being in the Old Testament is just kind of like the best point of reference because we live in a world post all of that. But if you look, like the figure shows up in Greek mythology as Zeus, it shows up in Zoroastrianism, it shows up in Judaism. And so what you have is this dominator thing. And so you start structuring society like that. And so you have,
Right.
we'll call it this archetype, this dominant individualistic archetype, right?
Yeah.
And
Pharaohs, kings,
kings, all the shit,
Even
right?
like a hierarchical society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what you have is you have all these older religions into Greece, and then you have Greece into Rome, and this power structure then moves into the Roman, the Holy Roman Catholic Church through the same structure. It has the same identity as it manifests in these other mythologies.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you have the Protestant split, and you have a new dominance of the empire. So you have the British Empire acting as the new emanation of the demiurge, or this false god.
Yeah, because they kind of like adopted this, like the idea that the king is a holy,
Right.
which isn't a new thing.
And so you have it pop up there, and then from there you have it. What do? They go into the world. They assimilate the pantheons of religious people, create hierarchical structures, and within 2 generations, all of these people are seemingly serving the same archetypal force or the same deity through different names. And so you have, Rome does this; it assembles pantheons. The Holy Roman Catholic Church does this, and then through the ultimate individualized endeavor, capitalism, through the British Empire, you have them go into the world operating as this false creator. It says, oh, well, these are all of these things of the world, and I'm going to take them and I'm going to sell them as if they invented them or something like that. So you have the same model that goes through, and then you have that transfer into imperialism in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but what I'm saying is the archetype has remained in power for at least like 3,000 years.
Right.
And
more.
Maybe more. I think that there are different dominants that come in. And so this particular lesson, I think, is highlighted in Gnosticism. And so the idea is recognizing that there is this real or not, like literally real. I can't give it a name but as a spiritual force, as a what would you call that? Like a structure that exists underneath reality. It has existed, and it has these same characteristics. So it's identifiable, even though it may not be exactly literal. It's a tendency that exists in the world that has been going on for like a really long period of time.
I think another thing to go along with that, this is slightly different, but we are hierarchical creatures naturally. Do we feel like this is going along with what we're talking about?
In the most basic sense, even in the primitive sense, I would say, yeah.
I'm saying in a primitive sense, we are. And you can see it.
Because I mean, if you just do something as silly as go to, like, for example, like a group of gorillas in the jungle, there's hierarchy there, everywhere there's hierarchy there. And it's like to say that we don't have a hierarchy, or that we just made up a hierarchy out of nowhere, which is totally human and not animalistic. That's
right.
That's naive.
The hierarchy wasn't constructed. It's been absolutely exploited.
It's been exploited, which
I
is a
think-
human thing. I
right.
believe.
I think yeah, it is a human thing because you're not seeing gorillas or baboons exploit the hierarchy. And by the way, gorillas and baboons and chimpanzees, they do
They do
horrible things.
How about those bonobos though?
Yeah, bonobos too. I think actually bonobos is what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
But okay, Clint, on this note, talk to us about your opinion just about what is going on in society right now. You can pick anything, but maybe let's go with what's happening with the civil unrest, the election.
If I may add to that, do you think that like this entity, this false god,
Yeah.
I almost feel like, and I want to be careful because I don't want to appear as like completely Looney Tunes and things, because it's like I actually like, maybe after the show we can get a little deeper on this, but do you think that, I think this entity is worried. I think that there's more people waking up now to the realization that the system by which the what we are taking for granted as being our imperialist globalist world,
Mhm.
we're really taking it for granted, and we're not, and people are realizing that this is not the best road for the race to live in. This is
Mhm.
not the road for humanity. This is something that is we're being manipulated,
Yeah.
Does this make any sense to you?
Yeah. I mean, at my most hopeful,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that there is a collective awareness of this like shadow aspect of us, which is this self-serving, you know, screw everybody else sort of mentality that we've been operating with. And I think that it's been a shadow. It's been, when you look at like the 1950s and you look at like the good old, nobody's talking about us, destroying other nations or,
Mhm.
getting involved in all of these ways. And so it's been a shadow thing. It's been the thing that supports us, but we've been unwilling to face it.
Mhm.
And so I think that like collectively we're facing our collective shadow as a capitalistic, individualistic group.
Sure.
And I think that, I think that part of that has the potential to make dramatic changes. And so there's two tendencies I have. One is that there are different dominants that exist, and that the age of the I'm going to pull back just a little bit. Is that if reality is this, if reality is the totality of everything, is that there is a thing that is so infinite that it can't even comprehend itself, and that it participates in smaller level models to understand itself, and
simulations of itself.
That's what reality is it interacting with all aspects of itself. And so to engage this particular aspect of itself, we have the reality that we live in. And so what we're doing is we're participating with this individualistic thing, and that we are integrating it into collectively, but on behalf of the totality, we are helping it understand itself by living out its expression through a comprehensible medium, which is a lower dimensional reality, which is like us participating in time. Whereas this thing can't understand itself because at higher levels of consciousness or awareness, everything sort of becomes everything, and it becomes hard to tell what's this or what that. And so to understand itself, I think that reality is playing out different aspects of itself, and it's happening on different levels. So I think that like a lifetime, my job is to integrate all of them that present themselves to me to become a whole smaller model of the totality, right? Mm-hmm. And then there are group dynamics. So it's like certain cultures play out certain dominance. They have certain religious motifs that they play out that correspond to this understanding. And then on the largest scale, I think that there is a cosmic dominant, and that it seems like, several thousand years of living under the dominant of this particular archetype seems like a very long time, but it's just part of like a very large cycle of cycling through these different aspects.
Oh, yeah.
And so as we cycle through them, we participate with physical reality in different ways. And so you might say that, I'll just throw out some crazy shit. And I'm not like, a lot of this stuff's not really literal,
Throw it out.
but it might be literal. But like the idea of Atlantis
Yeah.
is these the past ages are different models of reality that we have worked through and that came to completion, and then a new dominant starts. If you look at the Hopi legends, there have been like multiple different destructions through different mediums, and I think that those mediums give indication that the destructions are related to different archetypes that are playing themselves out in reality. Now, I said there were two options. The other option is that we are some sort of special holy creature that has been trapped in a soul well, and the illusion is presented to us to keep us trapped because a thing that can trick us will keep us trapped here until we can gain higher levels of consciousness.
Which is kind of a biblical thing a little bit, is it?
Well,
In some sense, which is that like we're holy, but we've stumbled into unfortunately this way of living, or we've been put into this way of living that is challenging our holiness constantly.
Yeah, but I would say that what it is actually that all the things that you can think or feel generate emotion, and as a divine thing, when you generate feeling, the feeling can be taken from you because you're giving it away instead of just being as part of this larger aspect. And so the worst case scenario is that you're in a soul well and they'll just change the illusion and you won't even know that it happened. Right. And that it'll just keep more. And that there's a certain leakage of enlightened people. Like as you reach these certain densities of novelty or certain densities of awareness collectively, like right now, if you look at the curve of like, I'll use McKenna's novelty. That
we talked about this last episode.
Yeah, is that we're at like a super huge peak of that.
Yeah.
And that there are a certain number of people that on that curve have the realization and escape the illusion. Yeah. But all of these people that you were talking about that don't necessarily, they're not reflecting on this.
Yeah, they're just like, what are you talking about?
Reality will just shift again, and they will be here doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And on some days, I really feel like that might be the case. I know I'm talking like super far out, so I want to like be really clear. Is that like I only partially. It's hard to talk about literal or not literal because things are symbols and they're real at the same time. And my experiences have led me to believe in this transcendent all that we're intertwined with it in this way. And so there's something going on, and to make sense of that, there's some sort of illusion that's bringing those things to light. And on the grandest scale, let's say there even is this thing that is tricking us, is that it performing that trick is bringing us into awareness of a wedge or an aspect of the totality. So even at its worst, it's a divine thing as well because it exists within the totality. And so if you ever, like whenever I get like really worried or worked up about anything, I start to try to always step back and look at larger context. So even the worst things in the world, like a crazy fake God that keeps human souls trapped and sucks them dry, is actually part of something much, much bigger experiencing itself.
That's a good way to think about it. That's a helpful way because honestly, I need to be doing that.
Just keep zooming out.
I get stuck very easily in the negative context when I start to think about this kind of stuff. And if I'm thinking about something like that, like a trickster type, this is kind of sounds like this jester.
Very powerful, jokester, but false god.
Yeah, false thing that will keep you stuck somewhere. It's definitely a good thing to zoom out like that.